Well, I am very excited to see what it is that you can tell us from these clips we're about to show you. And of Joe Biden, unedited, we're just going to present the clips as they're in public space right now. Anyone can go and pull these up. They're unedited. We're just going to show you these clips. And what I would love for you to do is using your finely trained eye and your skill of observation and tell us lay people what it is that you see. So if you could start with the first clip.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice president, but I think she was not qualified to be president.
Now, I started with that one, doctor, because that was not a misspeak, right? That was a full thought. That wasn't a stutter. It wasn't a stammer. It wasn't any kind of speech disorder. That was a full thought. That's just one of many that I could have pulled and presented. Again, if you're not morally compromised or blind and deaf, you have heard Joe Biden have these not misspeaks, full thoughts that make no sense at all. Just from that clip and thinking about the many clips that we could have added to this to show him having a full thought that makes absolutely no sense, what do you observe?
Well, there's a couple of things. Okay, for example, you're a very skilled public speaker, and you've obviously worked hard on that skill, and you're very good at it. Me, not so much. I've spent more time examining patients over the years. But when you think about an elder statesman like Joe Biden, who's been in the public eye and in public service, and literally been in front of tens or hundreds of millions of people via broadcast over his entire career, you know, his mistakes, like calling Vice President Harris, Vice President Trump, or referring to the Ukrainian president as Putin, those are pretty big gaffes. But when you add those to the too numerous to count videos of him clearly having a difficult time expressing himself, it makes a very compelling argument that there is a cognitive problem there that is very significant.
I saw in him then the same character that I see in him today. And even though he has faced unimaginable tragedies, his optimism is undaunted. His strength is unshakable. His hope is undeterred.
The death stare. There's been a lot of memes. There's been a lot of gesturing about it. But that is just weird. Again, if you're talking about someone who have not spent, I mean, he's been in public office longer than I've been alive. And so when you have someone who's been in the public sphere for that many years, who's a trained professional and presenting himself on stage, and you get that death stare, what is that?
Well, what you're seeing there is called masked faces, and it's a very common symptom in the Parkinsonian gamut of Parkinsonian-related illnesses. So you'll see that he doesn't blink. He has an absence of emotion or expression on his face, and that's an extremely common symptom of Parkinson's disease, and one that's been evident in President Biden now for, I've seen it for 5 years at least. He also exhibits there what we call bradykinesia and decreased arm swing. When you look at the posture of his arms there, they're almost mannequin-like. And you'll notice that he has decreased arm swing in other videos, but kind of the mannequin presence of his arms and hands in that is very compelling as well.
But now, you said that you've been seeing it, like the death stare, just kind of with not blinking, just standing there, very awkward, that you've been seeing that for some time. But again, you have a trained eye, so maybe you picked up on it sooner. I'm just now seeing it. It's so obvious and it's so numerous. Is there a progression that we're
Oh,
seeing
sure.
here of
Sure,
decline?
sure. Yeah, no, this is a progressive neurological illness that, yeah, over time, his symptoms are going to get worse. And ultimately, Parkinson's disease, and in this case, I think he has Lewy body dementia, is a fatal illness. Now, interestingly, Lewy body dementia, I've had some critics say, oh, you can't make that diagnosis except on autopsy. And that's actually not true. You can make the diagnosis with a brain biopsy, but we don't go around doing brain biopsies on patients because it doesn't change what we do. It doesn't change the treatment plan, and that's a very invasive diagnostic procedure. And frequently, Lewy body dementia, just like Alzheimer's type dementia, is a diagnosis that is made on pathology, meaning on a postmortem exam after the death of the patient. But when you take the Parkinsonian.
So that's kind of disingenuous when they say, oh, you can't diagnose someone with that unless you do an autopsy. Well, the person's dead at that point.
Right.
So it's kind of disingenuous.
Yeah, it is. And with his striking Parkinsonian features that have been going on for years, and his mental decline that is consistent with dementia, that's Parkinson's disease with dementia, also known as Lewy body dementia.
Now, what stage would you assess him or diagnose him as being?
Now there are different staging criteria for Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia, but for the layperson, I'd say he's in the moderately severe stage of the disease, or moderately advanced. Unfortunately, this is a disease that ultimately these patients become non-ambulatory, they become non-communicative, and they require assistance for all activities of daily living, ultimately not being able to feed themselves, ultimately not being able to be fed, and having to be sustained with tube feeds, or having to have what we call parenteral nutrition. So the end stage of this illness is death, but these patients progress to where they're non-communicative and they're bedridden.
What is Lewy body dementia?
Lewy body dementia is Parkinson's disease with dementia, with mental status changes consistent with a long-term progressive cognitive decline. And in this case, President Biden's been showing symptoms of both Parkinson's disease and dementia, as I mentioned, for at least 5 years.
And what we're doing here, looking at these videos, are just some of the clips. And we're not going to show every single clip all of us have seen over the past 5 years of Joe Biden. But we're looking at some of these clips and asking you, doctor, to observe it with your trained eye and give us your diagnosis. This is what you would do, as we've explained earlier on, with any other patient, a child who's not verbal or someone who's at a later stage of cognitive decline. You would walk in and observe them. And so I think this is very important that we just make that point very clear. Can we go to clip number 3, please?
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.